Good day, this is Professor Will, CBMD PhD. Today is Friday, May 29th, 2020. It is 1:39:49 seconds a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this is a continuation of my Corona series. So let's get started here. Heart surgery stalled as COVID-19 spread. Date May 28, 2020. Source University of Ottawa. Summary. Two recent journal articles explore how hospitals worldwide scaled back on heart surgeries as the pandemic hit, and how they can resume those operations in the world still plagued by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. As the novel coronavirus spread across the globe in early 2020, hospitals worldwide scaled back medical procedures, including life-saving heart surgery, to deal with the emerging threat of COVID-19. Now, as the SARS-CoV-2 virus becomes a chronic fact of life, hospitals must find ways to resume cardiac surgeries while protecting patients and healthcare workers as much as possible from SARS-CoV-2. Recent articles that examine how cardiac surgery centers have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and how they can resume operations in an environment characterized by low-grade long-term prevalence of SARS-CoV-2. Cardiac surgeons who provide life-saving procedures must manage two threats at the same time. Obviously, the threat from COVID and that of death or complications from untreated heart disease. As such, patients with the most pressing cardiac needs have to be triaged as objectively and as reliably as possible using predictor tools such as the one developed at the University of Ottawa. Every day we strive to preserve capacity for a possible COVID surge, but at the same time we must optimally manage our many patients who need heart surgery, help ease their anxieties, and safely return them to enjoying a healthy life. Researchers found that 60 cardiac surgery centers in 19 countries had reduced their cardiac surgeries by an average of 50 to 75% in response to the pandemic. The widespread interruption in cardiac surgery described herein adds to the concerning observation that excess non-COVID-19 mortality may now surpass mortality directly related to COVID-19 infections. COVID-19 vaccine development. New guidelines for ethical approach to infecting trial volunteers. Date May 28, 2020. Source University of Warwick. Summary. Allowing consenting volunteers to be deliberately infected with COVID-19 for the purpose of developing a vaccine could be done ethically and potentially speed up its development. Researchers have developed a set of ethical guidelines to guide researchers on an ethical approach to deliberately infecting volunteers who have been given a vaccine candidate with COVID-19. Researchers argue that this may significantly speed up the process of vaccine development and potentially save many lives. The work has been externally double-blind, peer-reviewed, and is published today, May 28th, in the Journal of Medical Ethics. Currently, there are several vaccine candidates that are undergoing human safety testing, but to find out whether they work, we need to discover what happens when a vaccinated person is exposed to COVID-19. With new infections dropping in the countries where research is taking place, it may be a long time before many of the volunteers in these experiments naturally come into contact with the disease. Deliberately infecting volunteers with a disease as dangerous as COVID-19 has previously been considered to be unethical by the research community. However, I believe that the current global situation is so different to those previously faced that it is ethical in this case. In other areas of life, it is not unusual for society to allow individuals to do things that put them at personal risk, such as to be a firefighter or a health professional treating COVID-19 patients. Speeding up vaccine development, even by a few weeks or months, could result in saving many lives. The research analysis each of the common arguments against these types of experiments: the risk of harm to volunteers, the risk of no usable vaccine, the validity of a volunteer's informed consent, the reputational risk to research, and that this could be a slippery slope to increasingly unethical research. Research demonstrates that these arguments can be overcome, and in fact we do not need to lower our ethical standards to permit these types of experiments, and that it is possible to put sufficient ethical safeguards in place. The article provides guidance for regulators and researchers and poses three key questions for those planning vaccine development studies. Has reasonable care been taken to maximize the potential benefits of proposed study and minimize the risk of harm to participants? Is the informed consent process sufficiently robust? What do we need to do now to amend our processes to speed up the consideration and approval processes for proposed COVID-19 vaccine candidates Phase 2 and Phase 3 trials? Researchers show that it is incorrect to rule out human challenge experiments as unethical in relation to COVID-19 vaccine development. Researchers argue that you can apply the same standards of ethics, but that they lead us now to a different conclusion because the facts are different. Very large numbers of people globally are affected both directly and indirectly from COVID-19, and the saving of a few weeks or months of time and vaccine development can be expected to result in saving a large number of lives. There are also good ways to minimize the risk of harm to volunteers, and it is ethical, and researchers argue admirable to allow a volunteer to choose to take a personal health risk to help serve a greater benefit to humanity. Domestic violence reports on the rise as COVID-19 keeps people at home, study shows. Analysis of calls to police in Los Angeles. Indianapolis also shows traffic stops and burglaries declining. Date May 27, 2020. Source University of California, Los Angeles. Summary. Researchers have found an increase in domestic violence reports in Los Angeles and Indianapolis since the stay-at-home restrictions were implemented in March. Researchers applied mathematics to interpret and make sense of police crime data, predict that the incidents should gradually decrease as people return to normal routines, but would likely increase again if there is a second wave of COVID-19 infections that prompts new stay-at-home orders. Shelter-in-place rules, by mandating more time at home, are very likely to increase the volume of domestic and intimate partner violence which drives behind closed doors. During the COVID-19 pandemic, both Los Angeles and Indianapolis already have been significant increases in domestic violence calls to the police. And we know domestic violence is one of the crimes least reported to the police. The researchers analyzed police calls for service before or during the coronavirus pandemic, from January 2nd to April 18th in Los Angeles, and from January 2nd to April 21st in Indianapolis. Los Angeles implemented safer-at-home rules were on March 20th, and Indianapolis enacted similar orders on March 24th. School, restaurant, and bar closures were ordered in both cities on March 16th. The researchers also analyzed reported crime statistics, different sets of figures reflecting that police investigations into alleged crime have occurred. Through April 10th in Los Angeles and April 18th in Indianapolis. Both cities saw a statistically significant increase in domestic violence calls for service after stay-at-home policies, the researchers report. If stay-at-home rules are reinstated, the researchers expect the number of calls for service to remain high as long as these rules are in place. By comparison, the number of reported robberies have decreased significantly in Los Angeles and stayed relatively consistent in Indianapolis. Burglaries have decreased significantly in Los Angeles and slightly in Indianapolis. Vehicle thefts were moderately higher in Los Angeles, but unchanged in Indianapolis. Traffic stops were significantly down in both cities. Overall, these shifts are perhaps less substantial than might be expected given the scale of the disruption of social and economic life brought on by COVID-19. Overall, people were still finding opportunities to commit crimes at approximately the same level as before the crisis. The researchers also write that physical distancing measures are likely to significantly alter and disrupt the conditions under which crime typically occurs. Crime patterns, they note, may provide valuable insights into whether individuals and communities are complying with critical public health measures. Having crime patterns remain stable overall despite physical distancing, measures may suggest the need to devote more resources to enforcing distancing rules. Good day, this is Professor Will, CBMD PhD on infectious disease and microbiology. I hope you enjoyed listening. Until next time, have a great day.